Hi, I'm Lisa Saunders. Welcome to the Lisa Saunders Show. Today we are going to talk to a pretty world-famous author, and to help me interview him is John Valeri, columnist and reviewer. You've been on my show how many times now?
I think this is the fourth.
The fourth. Because when I had a serious author coming on, I thought I better have John Valeri. So you drove about 50 minutes to get here.
For you, anything.
So thank you. And I would love to introduce Mark Howell. He is the author of Like a Rolling Stone, and he comes to us from England, complete with a British accent, even though you've been here a long time now, right?
That's right.
How long have you been here?
I've been here since 1964, the date of what happened in this book.
Okay, well tell us, what is your
and Lisa,
book about?
that's the best introduction I've ever had. I'm just so delighted and charmed that you're actually letting me talk about my book. Thank you. This is a wonderful thing.
You're welcome.
John.
I was very interested to read it. I started reading it, because online they let you read the first couple pages, and I was very interested. I was very impressed, but I could tell it sounded like a guy's book, so I thought I better have a guy help ask you the questions. So tell us
You read my book. I'm so happy, and you read my book.
I did. But when you said I got to have a guy, I said, I'm the first one you thought of?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a girl's book.
I wish my husband was here because he really knows. You're going to talk some about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones because you impersonated a Rolling Stone,
Yes.
one of the Rolling Stones. And my husband would have a lot of questions for you because he really knows it.
Because he's a lawyer? No, he's not a
yeah,
lawyer.
he's just grew up, with his older sister and brother. I mean, that's all they listen to. So he really knows it. Poor John doesn't know it as well. So you're going to have to teach us. Okay, so just tell us.
Well, I mentioned the lawyer simply because we were impersonating two of the Rolling Stones in crossing the United States by car.
And that's
in
what your book is
1964.
about.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a true story. The fellow who made the journey with me came over to visit to make the signature that it's all legal. He's a magistrate nowadays, and this is the adventure we had. It raises many issues about what we did and whether it was a great thing, a good thing, or not a good thing. So the book is there for you to decide. The fact is that it was 1964, beloved Kennedy was still cold in the grave, and most young Englishmen, before they went to university, would want to come to America, and I was one of those people.
And you went to Cambridge University.
Eventually, I was going to go to Cambridge, and the young man who shared a cabin with me, entirely accidental, we met as cabin mates, was going to law school. We met aboard SS United States, which is an enormously wonderful boat. It may be in the knacker's yard now, but in its day, it was a record-breaking liner across the Atlantic. Oh. And it was glorious. And we were in third class, which is the bowels of the boat.
Does it smell down there?
You
That
bet.
diesel, that fuel
Yes.
smell?
Oh, yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. And you'd rise in your bunk as you went through the Bay of Biscay and crash down. It was an extraordinary experience. It was really lovely.
And how long did it take? Do you remember?
It took actually a week. It's a record-breaking boat in terms of speed, but it did take a week. And during that week, we got to cook up what was going to happen once we got to New York City. The fact is that other people on the boat influenced us enormously. One of them was a gentleman called Tony Hendra, who would later be famous as the founder of the Harvard Lampoon, and he's also in Spinal Tap as the agent. He's a remarkable man. And his sidekick, Nick Ullett, were going to America, to Las Vegas, to be entertainers. And as a consequence of this, they got us all singing on the boat. There were lots of girls from Painesville, Ohio, returning from their year abroad, and we were all singing Beatles songs. I'll never forget coming by the Statue of Liberty in the boat as we arrived, and we were all upstairs, even first class. Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. The Stones had nothing on that. This was Beatles. We had learned to sing Beatles songs across the Atlantic.
You remember that moment.
Oh, I'll never forget it.
So just like when I read in these stories about immigrants seeing the Statue of Liberty,
the Duke and Duchess of somewhere or other in Britain, famous at the time. They were there in the crowd. We were all singing to her. Her head moved, I remember it. She smiled at us.
So that was the first time you'd ever been in the
Yes,
United States.
this was the first time in America for both of us. And now here we were in New York City, which was an absolutely amazing city at that time. It wasn't smooth like LA. It was jackhammers, and everybody was getting on with it, and it was terrific. And I very quickly got a job. My friend David, carpenter.
Doing what?
Actually, it's funny you should ask, but I called up my dad and I said, Dad, I love this wonderful city and I want to get a job here and I want to stay. And oh God, he said, you want some help with a job? Listen, take this phone number down. So I did. And my father had gathered this phone number from a previous visit that he'd paid to New York. And I dialed it. And they answered, Conrad Hilton here. Conrad Hilton. Oh, my father said you might be able to get me a job. Oh, for heaven's sake. He said, yes, I like your accent. Turn up for the elevator operator tomorrow morning. And I got a job as an elevator operator, again selling newspapers to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and earning as much money as you needed in those days to buy a car. And
now, was that your whole plan in coming here to impersonate the Rolling Stones? Or
not at all,
So
no.
you cooked up that idea later?
Yes, well, almost
Okay.
immediately. Once we got the car, David and I, we heard that the Rolling Stones were going to be in Manhattan. They were competing against the Beatles, but they had never done a tour in the U.S. Their only hit was Goat's Head Soup, I think it was their hit. So they were not big, but we liked the Stones. We knew of them. So we went to the Peppermint Lounge, and they weren't there. They didn't turn up. There was no tour. But there was a poster lying in a puddle, and it had a picture of them. And I looked awfully like a person who I actually knew called Brian Jones. He and I came from the same town, Cheltenham, and he'd been to a different school than me, but that's where he was from, Brian Jones, and he was in the Stones. And there was another person, Keith Richards, who looked just like my friend David. So we realized that we looked like two of the Rolling Stones. So why not? It seemed a good idea at the time. Every life is a fable of sorts, isn't it? So we were making up our reality. We would put this picture in the back of the car and say, Rolling Stones, New York to Los Angeles, and see what happened. Well, honestly, halfway to Niagara Falls, once we left New York, we got our jobs, we'd folded our jobs, we bought this car, this electric blue Plymouth. It was just a wonderful car. And off we went. And the first cop to pass us, the first sheriff in his car, rolled down his window. He would not be the last to do this. Right across the United States, he said, you boys are coming with me.
Why,
well, in those
though?
days, because he had a wife at home, in those days, the wife was at home, and he had a daughter, and he knew that this was a coup. And he was going to take the Rolling Stones off the highway and take them home. Well, by the time we got there, this gentleman,
So not to
sheriff,
arrest you, but just to show off.
yeah,
to his
oh, absolutely. No,
family
he had a
that
cocktail
the
party.
Rolling Stones
There was a party awaiting
at his
us. All of his neighbors were there. And it was up to us now.
Oh my God.
That hasn't happened to you?
We didn't know any Rolling Stones songs. We only knew Beatles songs. And David was on the guitar. He was wonderful. And I had a sort of
thank goodness he could play.
countertenor voice. I don't know. But I will never forget, ever, what it was like when we've got this whole party there and we're singing our hearts out. And David's playing like Django Reinhardt.
Beatles.
And playing the whole repertoire of Beatles.
As the Rolling Stones.
And Mary, the daughter, I remember her, she grabbed my hand and she took me behind the hayrick. You see, we're now on a hayrick in this gentleman's backyard. That's how it was. And we danced the way down that hayrick, like Rogers and Astaire. And what was those? What was the two great dancers?
Ginger Rogers.
Yes, that was it. It was just an amazing moment. I realized that my life had met its moment.
But you can get girls if you
Yes,
pretend.
and more than that, that life was truly wonderful. Life was in rhythm. Life was a spectacle. Life was beautiful. Yes, we had a kiss. And David and I didn't wash that like the Rolling Stones sign on the side of the car. We left it there. That's what happened. So we say goodbye to those lovely, lovely people. I'll never forget them. And onward towards LA, which was where
What are
we
you
were
going to do
to.
if she reads this book and finds out that you weren't really the Rolling Stones? Or does she already
There
know?
are hundreds, there are plentiful number of housewives in America alive today who believe that they were romanced by the Rolling Stones.
I hope they're not watching your show.
I know. Well, this is why
Yeah,
I
I'm-
thought, this sounds like a
I-
guy
I-
story. I got to have John here.
I'm ready for this. I'm ready for this. And so was David Quinlan. He had his concerns, my friend, David. I'm in the book. I'm Tom 1. Tom is Welsh for twin, and I have a twin brother, so I'm Tom 1, and David is David Carpenter, for the slight religious timbre of that. And we didn't really want to get into deeper and deeper water with this, but there came a moment when, because the Stones were now getting very big, and our repertoire of the Beatles was growing, we couldn't stop it, nor would people allow us to stop it when they found our car parked in some drugstore parking lot, and we'd a whole gathering there, and we had to go to everybody's home. Finally, the sheriffs were insisting that we sleep in the barn, and this was safe in those days. You could always sleep by the side of the road in the car. We were having this American experience, which was probably, it did depend on impersonation. Now's the time for me to mention that my friend David and I, he's a magistrate, have looked up the history of impersonation. Impersonation is not all bad. For example, Eric Remarque, who wrote a book called All Quiet on the Western Front, very famous writer, great book. He was much reviled by the Nazis because he wrote a book about the defeat of Germany, and they harassed him, the police and everybody. So what he did was he got a hold of one of these uniforms of generals in Nazi Germany and went all over Germany on his motorcycle, barging into police stations and releasing people who had been arrested. He released hundreds and hundreds of people through impersonation. Now, our impersonation was of a different order. This was a fantastically heroic thing for him to do and to have done. So there is a history of, it's not all bad. The thing is, we were giving people what they wanted. You see, what if somebody, God forbid, steals my book from a bookstore? Curse on them. But I still am very concerned about whether they enjoyed the book. I hope they liked the book.
Well, I like the beginning. John, you read it. What kind of questions do you have?
Well, the funny thing is, I read the book, and I'm listening to you talk, and this is all striking me as very familiar because it is all in the book, and the book is described as an almost true novel. It sounds like much more of it is true than not. So I'm wondering why you chose fiction as opposed to memoir.
Because I'm making a fable. I'm involved in this magical line between reality and making it up. I choose to revisit that arena. There is another girl in the book at the end who was my girlfriend from England, and our favorite song was not a Beatles song or anything. It was another song anyway that was our favorite, about heaven and hell and so forth. It was interesting. And so I drag her into the book. It is true that halfway through the journey, I got a phone call from her saying that she had just come back from her trip to Europe with her parents, and she'd met Robert Graves in some Mediterranean island. And she had shown Robert Graves, the great poet, my letters. And I said, you showed him my letters to Mary. What did he say? He said, they were sub-Kerouac. I said, he used the word Kerouac. Subs, that doesn't matter about it. Kerouac and my name. This was another great, glorious moment. It's all a fable. I mean, it's true. But it's a fable that I'm like Kerouac. The book is a muddle about this. we were in a muddle about this. Finally, at the end, we have to confess. The confession was awful.
To who did you have to confess?
Well, the way it really happened, I write about the book in different terms, but what really happened is we were in a drugstore outside of Vegas, and we'd given a ride to two lovely girls, and they had great fun with us, and we were having a terrific time. And one went to the drugstore, and when she came out, she was carrying a newspaper, and I saw the headline, "Oh, Rolling Stones in Los Angeles." And she's looking at us, and she's looking at the photo. And the next time I turn around, there's David, my friend, with a little blood coming down his face after being punched in the nose.
Who punched him in the nose?
The girl. And he said to me,
"A woman scorned."
Yes, exactly. There's nothing worse. And he said to me, "That went well, don't you think?" I said, "Yes, pretty well." So that was the first disclosure that we weren't going to get away with this.
And how old were you?
I was 20. Okay, that's my excuse. and we really didn't know any Rolling Stones songs, but we did wonders for the Beatles. People loved the Beatles, and they wanted to hear the Beatles. I'm going on too long.
No,
But let me ask
that's
you
why
then
you're here.
about the music, since we were sort of talking about the music and how you're a little bit more familiar with it than we are. And I was wondering, you think of the Beatles and you think of the Rolling Stones, and they're very different, and they have a very different fan base. So what do you see as being, the difference in their music and sort of how that comes into an interpretation of a character, or what a fan of the Rolling Stones is versus a fan of the Beatles?
Yes, well, thank you for the question.
I told you ask hard questions.
Yeah, that's very good. The Beatles were love songs. They were essentially romantic, and the point that we had gotten to, everybody was doing twist parties in England. They're very American, but the Beatles were English, Liverpool, and they were singing about love, and in very, very sentimental rather than erotic ways. The Stones were the opposite. The Stones were urinating in back gas stations outside and deliberately playing a different act and different songs. So their songs were rock and roll. And we were not, David and I, into that much of rock and roll. We loved, close your eyes and I'll miss you. That stuff. And it worked much better. And it worked
for
wonderfully.
getting girls and for pleasing
They got us.
audiences.
Let's look at the reality here. It wasn't us getting girls at all. On the contrary, it's what they wanted. There's no way that they're going to have two guys, one called Brian Jones and the other Keith Richard, in their house, not doing something that was going to make history and improve their lives. It is astonishing that we haven't encountered anybody in our own age group now who fell foul to this, because people weren't falling foul to it. They may remember it. I'm sure they do. I'm surprised, actually, I didn't get too much feedback. And very lucky, says my friend, now a magistrate.
I don't know, after this you might.
Yeah, right.
This is where it all went
All
wrong.
these women across the country.
Well, in which case we deserve it. Because every life is a fable. I feel we did no harm, and it wasn't our fault. We were, by the way, encouraged by a group of young ladies from Painesville, Ohio, a wonderful college. They were on the boat, and it's they who got us started. And they were very great critics, and they made sure that we sang right, and they liked to party with Beatles songs. And it was a life-changing moment for them, too. So, by the way, no, I met plenty of them. And they said, how did it go? And I said, it's fine, we got away with it. Of course we got away with it. So yes, people have gone full circle on this.
Yeah. So can I ask you why you think people were so willing to believe in that, the impersonation?
Well, it's a mixture of music and fame. Music is a lure, is an aphrodisiac, and fame is the same. If you can link them, then fame is not a matter of doing well at your job, being loved or not loved. It's fame would be success, and music would be love. So you mix those two, and you've got a desire to believe. This desire to believe, we were party to it, because we wanted to believe that we're going to get away with this. We could have stopped it at any time by washing it off the car. But the fact is, and we did have some there's this problem of going to the drive-in movie in the book, where we wanted to go to a drive-in movie. Nobody'd seen those in England, and we went there and we put the speaker on the window, and then as we drove away at the end of the movie, of course it breaks the window. We forgot to take it out of the window. Now I have to break the window with a hammer to try and get it out of the way, and that looks like bullet holes, and now we're in real trouble. So every cop now sees not Rolling Stones, but a car with bullet holes.
With bullet holes.
That changes everything.
If it wasn't dramatic
I didn't
enough.
know that drive-in movies were an American thing versus.
They are an American thing, yes. So we'd never been to a drive-in movie, you see. So it caught us, and it made us very vulnerable. And at this point, the book changes, and our experiences changed a little bit. Things got a little difficult. It's a true story that we were bumped from behind by bad boys in Salt Lake City on the main drag, and we had to. And I'll never forget those two wonderful Lakota girls with their big, beautiful hats, and how we saved them from the bad boys. And it was essential to hide as Rolling Stones at that point. Not only because they were asking questions from a fan magazine. Okay, Brian, answer this question. Ooh. I do remember Brian Jones very well, by the way.
I'd like to hear it, because I looked him up, because I hadn't heard of that name before, so I looked him up today. I was sitting at Starbucks outside saying, who's Brian Jones? Rolling Stones. And
he actually founded the Rolling Stones. He was the founder of it with Jagger. And he was a bad boy in my hometown. He would take cars out to test drive them, pretending that he was going to buy them. And twice he turned them over in the main street. I'll always remember Brian.
Turned it over, like flipped it over?
Yeah, flipped it over. He was a bad boy, driving crazily on the main streets of my hometown.
Are you the same age as he is, or was? I mean, because I saw that he died early.
Yeah, my twin brother was married in the church where Brian Jones is buried. Brian's ending was exceedingly tragic.
He drowned, I read.
Well, he drowned. He drowned. He didn't pay the bill for the swimming pool, and the guy he owed money. I can't go on with that, sorry. But he met a very bad fate. Mm-hmm. But he was a lovely man. He was a great guitarist. And thank you, Brian, for helping David and I cross America as you and your friend.
So he was at least alive while you were doing this, right?
Yeah, very much. I did send a copy of the book to Keith Richards, who, as you know, lives in Connecticut. And
I didn't know.
You didn't know?
No.
He owns a restaurant up there. And he's actually got an amazing grounds. There's this funny story about Keith the other day when, a few months ago, in the lake there on that land. He's got a lovely house, there's lots of grandchildren, his lovely wife, but a snapping turtle suddenly came out at him and almost attacked him, and so he brought some sort of authorities in to inspect this because he was scared about this, and they said, this creature here is very rare, and it's been living for a long time. It's possibly 400 years old. And Keith said to the naturalist, "You mean the last person he saw was an Indian?" Yes, indeed. So Keith's living the ultimate American life. God bless him. Thank you, Keith, by the way, for paving our way.
Do you think he'll see this video?
I think he needs to be on your show.
He never responded to my sending it. We don't know. We don't want trouble, It's just
now, how does your wife think about all this? You reliving all this?
Well, she's met David, who is my fellow traveller.
Okay.
And it liked him very much and understands him very well. And the question continues, and that's the thing about the book. It's a constant book, and it needs rereading if you can bear it, because the main issue is not resolved. All of our lives are fables. And we hope that anything that we do to make others happy, they did want a little concert, and we did provide it, would be in one way or another part of the fable and the folklore of our lives. But yes, I apologize for conning anybody if they feel bad about it. We
Oh,
did
but
not
you said
receive
you
any
get-
criticism. Oh, we got a bad
got a-
sore lip. Yeah, we got a little blood down
But you gave
David's.
free concerts, right? You sang, you didn't charge, or did
No,
you charge?
no,
Okay,
no.
so
We didn't
joy.
want anything. What?
And only a lot of joy. You gave
A lot of
of
joy.
God,
just
yeah.
a little bloody
Thank you,
lip. But I
John.
think we know why this book is really labeled fiction.
Yeah, right. We did get free board and lodging, but they insisted. And God bless the policemen, the sheriffs and the motorcycle cops were wonderful. They almost patrolled us so that we weren't bothered
now you wrote
until we got the bullet holes in the window.
You co-wrote another book before this one. What was it called?
Did I? I probably did.
Yeah, about the papers of Kennedy, or
Oh yes, yes. I've got the Kennedy assassination books that I've worked on with another great writer from Key West. Mm-hmm. That's that. There's a story too in the back of the book, and at this point I've got to mention how grateful I am to my family for being behind this book and just generally being my family. My wife Jan was born in Connecticut and went to school in Old Saybrook. Her daughter Melissa is married to a Coast Guard, Jerry, here in Connecticut. They'd have two boys, Chase and Preston. And then Jeff, my wife's other son, lives in Maine, and her other daughter lives on Long Island. These are wonderful, wonderful people who were behind the book. And my own son, Rafe, who's out in Connecticut with his two kids, Alec and Amelia, and his wife, Amanda. So God bless all of you wonderful, wonderful people that got this book into life and kept me happy. I am working on another book because the Kennedy series is a bit much. But one of my grandchildren, Rhiannon, appears in the story at the back of this book. This is worth mentioning because I lived with Jan in Key West until we moved up here to be with our daughter and
we
grandchildren.
have 2 minutes left, so just
Okay, and what happened is
finish
that
up.
this young lady said to me, "We're writing a book, Grandpa." And I said, "Why? What's it to you?" And she said, "Well, you know, a subplot is not just another plot; it's an echo of the main plot." I said, "Rhiannon, how would you know that?" She said, "Well, I learnt it from Hemingway." "Hemingway? You learning Hemingway at school?" No. Grandpa, you take me to the back of his house." "Oh, so I do. This is the house that belongs to a young man and his friends and Rhiannon's friends, but he happens to be the great-grandson of Pauline's servant in the house. So what's happening with this young lady is that they're playing in the Hemingway house, playing with the cats, playing in his pool, reading his manuscripts. Young lady, in my family, that's a bullseye." And that's a true story.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh,
It was
thank
wonderful
you.
to have you. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad I got to meet you. And I've already met your wife.
Yes, you have.
So,
Oh, because
you
she
know.
sends her fondest regards.
Yeah, well,
Thank
good,
you. This has
good.
been lovely.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Searing questions.
Doesn't I know. That was a clever question.
He's good.
I don't know about that.
He's
Well,
good.
thank you so much for joining us on the Lisa Saunders Show, and I will see you next week.